All right, everyone. Welcome to the Energeia podcast. Dr. G here. Grateful, as always, that you've tuned in. And today I'm rejoined by the great Andrew Haug at Arise Coaching and the AndrewHaug.com radio show. Check out episode 16 of this podcast for the down low on his background and profile, what he's done, what he's up to now. But Hoagie, welcome back, mate. Good to see your magnificent mug back on the show.
Likewise. How you doing?
I'm good, bro. I'm good, man. You and I today are going to have a bit of a free form, kind of see where our noses lead us type discussion today. I'm be very excited to do this. But the starting point and the general theme of what I'd like us to cover today, what I want to really make an effort to grapple with, and it's not a difficult thing. If this was an easy question or a couple of questions more accurately for us to answer, it wouldn't be the basis of a discussion. But I really think that what the general theme of what we're going to talk about today is such a stumbling point for so many people and so many coaches, people like ourselves, professionals that are trying to work with these people. And so the starting point and the general theme of what I'd like us to cover today can be summed up in the form of this two-part question. Why won't motherfuckers just get started? And if they do get started, why don't they make it stick? And the specific thing in question that those motherfuckers are either not starting or not maintaining is it's usually some particular behavior change or lifestyle modification, which they know intellectually and conceptually that they need to follow through on. And, sometimes as a matter of real necessity, if not urgency, but they just can't, they don't, or they won't make the shift from intention to action. They remain lingering and loitering at the start line. I think the old cliche that the road to hell is paved with good intentions is just, trite as it might be, cliched as it might be. It's just so apropos for so many people in this situation. But anyway, let me get your take on this, bro. Why are people either failing to get necessary developmental action for themselves underway in earnest? And why aren't they sustaining and maintaining it if they do get started?
It's a loaded question with a lot of different angles.
Super loaded question, mate. Making it difficult for you right out of the gate.
Ready to go out the gate. Obviously, change is difficult for everybody. And then comes change, comes pain, comes uncertainty. And again, a massive human need is certainty. People want to know where they stand. But when you jump into the unknown with no guarantee of things actually working, there's pain there of what if this doesn't work? What if I fail? It's just not worth the effort. I don't think I'm going to get a payoff because people want to know the result before they do it. And sometimes I'll compare others and see their results and think, oh, they'll get the same. They'll jump in quickly and then realize this is a lot of work. And then they just jump back out again. So there's so many factors to it. I think consistency is massive, but also just to go a bit deeper is what I always talk to clients about is why, getting people, like they say they want to make a change. Some people do. The why factor is important, but getting back to those who don't make the changes, they haven't thought deep enough about the desired result that they could get if they did make the change. So they sort of sit and stay as they are and then kind of wonder why they're miserable and things aren't working, or they're watching other people soar up to the mountain. Then they get, bitter and jaded and jealous and all those sorts of things, and they don't budge. I think sometimes people also set their expectations way too high as well. I always say just one step at a time at that time. And as simple as that sounds, the first step is the most terrifying for everybody to make a change in something. But I always encourage people, it's well worth the effort just to put one step forward and stop thinking about down the track. We future project way too quickly, and we lose touch with being present basically, and we hear that kicking around a lot. But people they want to be somewhere else, and it's just like, no, just one step at a time. Yeah, there's a lot more to discuss, so we can keep going. Over to you.
Yeah, man. Well, look, I agree that one step at a time is overwhelmingly the ideal approach for the vast majority of people. I think that there's separate discussion somewhat. I think for some people there is an argument to be made for you need to get some amount of shock and awe at the beginning to have the significance or the urgency of the project ahead land with you. I don't think one step at a time is a universally applicable thing, but it's a 99% for the vast majority of people. It's the approach with the most efficacy. It's what is going to stick. However, I think the issue is that people think about the process of incrementalism as a process of kind of retrofitting your mind where you're actually rebuilding your mind. And so they don't see the payoff because they think that, metaphorically speaking, a coat of paint here and a lick of plaster there, metaphorically in your own mind is what's going to do it. If you make these kind of relatively cosmetic changes that are relatively superficial, you feel like you're making the effort, when really a lot of the time the benefits of an incremental approach come from the idea of, no, this is a long drawn out process of actually restructuring yourself neuropsychologically. Like people want the kind of the warm fuzzy and the good feeling that comes along for the ride when you feel like you're making, it's not to say that those metaphorical coats of paint or licks of plaster can't be good things, anything that's tracking you in the right direction of happiness. But I think for some people, in terms of like making big, important changes to their physical and psychological health, they haven't grappled with the idea that this is not just a matter of like paving over the cracks of what's actually there, that there's a bit of work to be done. Quite a bit of it is going to be unpleasant, but that the payoffs that come from that, there is a way of rebuilding your mind incrementally over time in such a way that eventually you will come to associate the whole hard work and getting started aspects of things that you're currently not working hard on and not getting started with being joyful experiences, with being generative and gainful experiences. So what do you think of that analogy? What do you think of the idea that some people just don't stick with the program because they're really just applying coats of paint to their mind in a way where they really need to kind of rebuild the house in some sense?
Yeah, because as you said, I think, even demolishing the house is probably the way to go. What I always sort of suggest to some people, rebuild from scratch. But then again, that's pretty daunting. Yeah, the sort of cover up, eventually the cracks will show again. It's almost like you are putting a Band-Aid over something that will eventually just start weeping. So, just get in there and fix the wound. Go through the pain. I would just say there's no real easy way out from this. And unfortunately, when people hear that that's the only real option, they avoid it because, they link that to pain when we're wired for two things, pain or pleasure. But I always encourage people, the pain is not bad. It actually is your friend. And I'm more referring to emotional pain than the physical. The physical is completely up to you, whichever way you want to do things with your physical health. But emotionally, we struggle with that because there is this sort of, we don't want to be uncomfortable. And that's because our society has been wired now to be completely comfortable. We don't have to hunt for food. We got warm water. We got shelter. I mean, we'll never go through what ancestors and way back dealt with that paved the way to make our lives easier and more comfortable. And now it's even more comfortable now with, online, and you don't have to leave your house. So to sort of let people sort of say, if you want to make changes, this is what's involved. It terrifies some people, but they don't understand that there's so much greatness in that approach. You just got to get in there and do some of the work. But yeah, like I said, some people are just like, fuck that. And it's a bit sad because I don't think they understand just how close they are from actually overhauling some of their problems or things that they're not happy about in their life at all. And it's just sad to see that it's going to just monotone in that same state when they got to get in there and sort of, do some of the work. It's terrifying to some people, but I've often encouraged people, look, it is probably going to be the hardest and the best decisions you ever make for yourself if you're willing to get in there. But yeah, it's $1 million loaded question. It really is. It's easy to tell people, just fucking get in there and do it. But you get that whole fuck that resistance. Yeah, it's a tough one. It really is. It's like, because for us, you and I, we've done our own self-work. So we're like, yeah, just jump in. But of course, when we were trying that, we were like getting banged up and hurt, and we're like, God, this is just all too much. But I think there's such a beauty in that approach. I don't see myself avoiding any of that stuff anymore because I just think, wow, the payoff is so worth those efforts. And I think people just always want to find a softer landing than a full crash landing, I guess. But it's worth it. I always tell people it's worth going through, you know.
Yeah, look, I think two separate things that you said there independently linked together so well. The fact that we do live in this time of comfort, this time of extreme affluence. And, I've spoken on in many different fora on this podcast and with other people about evolutionary mismatch and the fact that, we are living in a society and in a time that is so far removed in so many ways for what our species is psychologically and physiologically adapted for. And basically, I think a lot of that fuck that attitude that you just mentioned and the failure to overhaul and the failure to grapple with how important this is and make it stick is a reflection of the fact that we do live in this time of comfort and plenty, and you just do not have the incentive. You do not have the incentive to basically recognize that you are not just an individual human being, as important as that is. You are a member of a species, and that species is supposed to be driven and operated, like any species with its own niche in nature. We've created too great a niche for ourselves. This is a whole other discussion about evolutionary philosophy and so forth. But as it relates to, the work that we do and stuff like that, I've actually found that framing gets through to people. Like when you sort of you tell them basically, you put it in a nice way and you try and put it in as compassionate way as possible. But basically, bro, you have become a bitch to the affordances of modern civilization. Like that's it. That's really what's steering you. You don't have to go to the gym, right? Because you don't have to toil for your food. You don't have to eat healthy, or you don't have to undertake a big hunting or gathering session to get calorie dense, nutrient dense food, because you can get in your car and go through the drive-through at Dunkin' Donuts and get more caloric content in 2 minutes than you would have in 2 days for most of human history, and so forth. And all of this disconnect from what we are as a species, and just kind of I think it just says so much about the plight and the kind of the tragedy, the pitiable tragedy of modern man, that we have found out we're so ingenious in so many ways as a species and as a civilization, but we've created many options for ourselves. We've created too much comfort for ourselves, and that comfort and those options give us the opportunity to have that fuck that attitude and be like, I'm just not going to start, because why would I? Like why would I skip the sleep in when like food's 5 feet away and my car will take me all the way to the door? Just to name two narrow examples of things that people, like comforts that people are availing themselves of. You could list thousands more. So I just think part of it is that modern human existence has become a comfy blanket for people, and that's a misadaptation of our species that is fast, I would say, disadapting us from our state of nature, from the natural order that we should be in.
You're correct. And the key word you also said was just options. Like, we have so many options now that will keep us in that state. And the question is, well, why would you go out and do something hard when you got all this? It's just, the brain's just like, we're going to stay in dopamine land, pleasure. This is just too good to ignore. And why would I go out and do that or whatever? But like I said, people don't understand the beauty in the suffering, as they say, because they, like, those words are just terrifying to people. Pain and suffering. It's like, actually, they're very, very beneficial. And it's up to, I always tell people, it's up to you how you choose to do those kind of approaches. If you want to, the pain and suffering is completely up to you how you approach it. It doesn't mean you got to, run a marathon and all that sort of stuff or beat yourself up. I mean, you still got to continue to take care of yourself, but it's more just emotionally readapting your mind to difficult situations. Because it was funny. I said this to a client the other week. We were talking about, I think I mentioned something to somebody else. I said, there is more self-help out there, more free advice, more mental awareness than ever before in our society. And there's so many more people suffering than ever before. So something is not working. So again, when we put to people about getting out there and doing some of their hard yards is a very good option that is being ignored, and people are still stuck in their suffering. And you think, wow, because some people think that if they're already suffering, why would you want to continue going through more suffering, in the sense of us encouraging them to deal with it as best you can and grow from that. People think it's just throwing another cement block in your backpack and then just weighing you down even more, when in actual fact it's so much more beneficial to work through it and continue to work through it. Yeah, it just baffles me when you put videos up and everyone's like, oh, that was really cool, good advice, yeah, great. It's like, but what are you applying it? Otherwise, you're just pissing in my pocket or just validating what I just said. But if you're not applying it, it's wasted words. So yeah, like I said, loaded question, man, going for hours about this. But yeah, now my brain's on a tangent thinking, yeah, comfortability just doesn't work. And the more I see it in friends and family and people, the more I'm just screaming on the inside going, man, if you did one thing difficult every day, you would grow. You probably wouldn't think you were at the start because you'd be like, this sucks. But it's so beneficial that you actually want to create more of it. And the funny thing is, when I say that to some people, they think, oh, what's I got to go out and just hurt myself or do something? I go, no, it's not an intentional thing like that. It's just trying out things that you probably think you weren't capable of doing. And then once you do that, you're like, oh, wow, I just did that. And then you just build from that. Some people think that it's got to be extreme from the get-go because you and I are pretty direct about how we do things. But I go, you just got to find a couple little things, do one or two things that you don't enjoy every day. And that will compound over time. And that will build your resilience again, because we're all born with that. And then somehow, once again, comfortability just becomes dormant. Oh, sorry, the resilience becomes dormant over time because we're learning to be just comfortable all the time. But I always tell people, just sort of get back out there and start, bringing back your resilience, because you'll cope better with life because it's so unpredictable. We didn't predict this pandemic. No one predicted all the other stuff that was happening. And like I said, we saw so many people suffer from this emotionally. When you think about all the people that went way before us in world wars and things like that, So it's just weakening, as you said, society, with people not having an understanding of emotional resilience, which I think is what going through hard shit, pain and suffering can actually bring to you if you tackle it head on. But yeah, easy said than done, because some people always throw that flag up and say, oh, you don't know what it's like. And then they add their diagnosis. And some people do have a chemical imbalance. I'm not knocking anything to do with the medical side of people's emotional problems. But then now we're in a society where everything's sort of also self-diagnosed. Well, I have this. Well, really? And sometimes when you question people, it's like, that's their safety blanket to show that, no, I can't go out and do that because I've got this. I go, well, where's the proof of that? Does someone tell you that you've got it, or you just self-diagnose you got it, be it anxiety or whatever? Now, it's not to say that not everyone suffers from that. People do. But sometimes I question people on that, and the defense is enormous, because it's like, that's their kind of, I wouldn't say get out of jail free card, but it's like it's their shield of safety so they don't have to try and get through it, which means, well, I've got my medical pass, so therefore I don't need to do that. Like go to school, I can't swim because I got a cold, so everyone else can do the swimming in the winter, but I'm safe up here. I'm sort of get out of jail free card. When I often just tell people, man, you got to use some of these tools that we've got out there to really get through that, because it does work. I mean, from my personal experience, the last several years, I've really demolished a lot of garbage that I held on for years, going through the swamp, draining the swamp, as I say, and then just filling it with clean, pure water. And you're like, man, this is the best pool I've ever been in. And best thing I ever did, jump in and just start swimming in it. It sucks, but eventually you'll find the plug hole down the bottom, pull it out, drain the swamp. And then that's where freedom lies. Unfortunately, people like to swim in shit. It's a tough one.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think just a few things that spring to mind. The pain and suffering aspect. Like, some people, some coaches, quarrel or take issue with that framing or the use of that terminology.
Yep.
And what I would say to them is that pain and suffering aren't the target. They're just kind of a necessary reality in the process, right? So you can
Yep.
end up not experiencing pain and suffering, doing things that previously you once did, and gain not only the same, like, better developmental benefits from them. Like, when you come to enjoy them and you come to actually get into the process and things like that, then pain and suffering really don't become the right, terminology to use in some sense anyway. But I just have a real issue with the people who say things like, oh, you shouldn't make it about pain and suffering because that's going to put people off and stuff like that. And, my take on that is, if you're so worried about semantics, if that's your sticking point is semantics, you've got a long way to developing resilience, right?
Yeah.
Right out of the gate. If you're going to land at this juncture where your inability to move forward rests on your unwillingness to just look at words like pain and suffering for what they are, just content neutral observations about
Yep.
reality, then my friend, you've got a lot of work to developing resilience. But just on the what you mentioned before about people watching your videos and not following up, this is something all coaches encounter. Also, so certainly I have heard this from many of my colleagues. Just why are our good points only like staying at right there? Like so we'll come up with some well
Mm.
crafted video, or maybe it's in a coaching session where we have this great breakthrough, and it always just comes back to this idea that this intellectual and conceptual versus experiential divide. So some coaches think that they've failed that they failed when a client hasn't produced some behavior change that they know is necessary or desirable, and this is where the intellectual and conceptual versus experiential divide really breaks down, because even though I can help a client have some tremendous breakthrough in understanding, I can't actually transform that understanding into action for them. I've worked with
Yep.
some clients where I have literally helped them methodically map out a step by step strategic sequence of clearly, lucidly articulated actions, just, smart goals, just to use a familiar framework. Everything's clear. There's no misunderstanding about the road ahead. And something that they've done, by the way, I've helped them craft it, but this is something that they believe that they have conceded as a good plan that they believe will orient them in the direction of their own goals and the vision for themselves. But then we find ourselves back at the whole, a couple of weeks later. So that plan that you put together for yourself, how's that working out for you? That same juncture, and literally none of it has stuck. And so some coaches see
Yep.
this as a sign of failure. But again, I just come back to this idea, and maybe it's a failure in the sense that maybe this person needs to work with a different coach, or maybe your style of coaching isn't appropriate for them. Those are totally, valid possibilities. But I think in some
Yep.
cases, it doesn't actually come down to that. I think in some cases, coaches who would otherwise have tremendous efficacy with that approach with some people, just with others, people just don't start. They just don't, they don't. Everything is laid out for them in a map format, in a totally understandable format, and that whole journey of 1,000 steps, literally the first foot forward doesn't transpire, and it's just what the fuck, this again, like your videos or whatever, right? Wow, that thing really landed with me. Fuck, I could do one simple thing today that will orient me in that direction, and they just don't. And it's not a hard thing
Mm-hmm.
normally, we can talk about the difficulty of development and building resilience in general, as a long-term personal project. But the actual micro steps, I mean, this is why we break them down into micro steps, right? This is why we do this
Yeah.
for our clients, right? We're trying to help them help themselves make a plan that for them and their unique psychology is practicable, that is realistic, and is just based on, again, clearly articulated and understood steps. And yet, even with all of that, application and building the right kind of strategy, sometimes it still don't take, my brother.
Yeah, and I've often brought it back to, as we said earlier on, is about the why factor. I think it's super important. I mean, you can lay out the map, but if they have no invested emotion or attachment to why they want to do it and why they want it bad enough, then it's not going to stick. So I often talk to people, they say, oh, I want to do this, I want to do that. I go, okay, yeah, but why? And then they sort of just go, oh, I don't know. Say, well, you've got to get deep enough to invoke emotion, enough to push you through the times when you don't want to be doing it. And that's when people end up sticking with things, when their why is deep enough. And that's the main focus I have with clients. I just always focus on, okay, well, you want to get healthier, I guess, from the reason you've called and what's not working in your life. And they're happy to sort of string about a whole bunch of stuff that they don't want. And then when you ask them what they do want, it's kind of vague. And then you got to drill down for that to get a bit more specific. And then it's like, okay, well, then how are you going to do it? Oh, I don't know. It's like, well, okay, we're not there to hold their hands, but we can guide them But then that's when I push deeper and go, well, why? Why do you want to be fitter and healthier and be less stressed and whatever? And then once you drill into that, you got to tap into what they're really wanting, because sometimes people don't know what they want. But when you keep probing a little bit, eventually it does start to click. And then that's what's going to get them up and going, is the why. And I always tell people, write it down, recite it every day, hold it in front of you, because the days you are not going to want to do certain things because comfortability will kick in, or the old mind's going to say, oh, we don't want to do this today, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, just have that why ready, recite it, just because that's going to draw you out. Once you've got enough emotion behind that, you'll just get out and go regardless. And then all of a sudden that mind's just going to be silent, or the old false self, as they call it, and you'll be on your way. And I've, personally proven that week in, week out with runs the last several years. It's like, there's days I don't want to do it, but then I just go, I dig into the why, and then boom, I'm already at the door, So I often tell people that's just proven, but you've got to get deep enough within yourself, and it's got to bring up some emotions. And the stronger the emotion, the stronger the why. You won't have a problem when the time will come, because we don't always, have a smooth ride up the mountain. It's going to hit fucking ditches and blah, blah, blah. But that why is just going to, if it's there and you've got it handy and you really have focused on keeping the emotion behind it, that's the stuff you use to drill through all the I can't be fucked doing this. And that's the main key. I often talk to people who come to me saying, I'm stuck and I can't get started. And most of the time they've never asked themselves why. All they see is what others are doing, or, oh yeah, I wouldn't mind having a bit of that, or they're motivated, or they got some willpower. And I'm like, that shit's like sugar. It's going to be a quick burst and then you're flatlining again, and it doesn't last. So I always say, go within, ask yourself the real honest questions, the truth. You know what the truth is. Most of the time we hide from it because it's daunting, it's scary, but as they say, the truth will set you free. And that's a really vital key that I often find with clients that actually start to get the results that they want, because they've never really asked themselves why. But when you dig in and then they discover it, boom, it's fucking game on. So yeah, how they get started is, why do you want to get started? That's kind of the key for
Yeah, and
me.
look, I think that the whole question of why, I think it's almost become loftier and more grandiose than it needs to be. Like the
Mm.
question of why
Yeah, I go
is
for it.
not for me about purpose or passion. It's about function, right? So it's like, what
Mm.
functionally do you want your outcomes to be in the world? And you mentioned the idea before, the idea of when the why is deep enough. When the why is deep enough, willpower, and by the way, I think I have a very strong view on willpower, that willpower is a neuropsychologically incoherent concept that doesn't make sense with the realities of science. But even for people who have a general sort of layperson's understanding of what willpower is supposed to mean, willpower doesn't matter when the why is deep enough. When you've reprogrammed yourself at a level where optimizing yourself for the function of your life, not lofty things like the passion or the purpose. Those things can be
Mm-hmm.
important too. Those things can obviously be important.
Yep.
But
And they show up eventually
they
too. Yeah.
absolutely start up. And I think one thing follows the other. But I think with a lot of people, the question of why needs to start as a question of function, as a question of what ultimately is this in the service of. Like, people often say you have to want to do it. I don't think that's necessarily true. I think, at least in the early going, whether you want to do it or not is immaterial. If you have to do it and you know it's the right thing to do, then want schmont. I think it's more accurate to
Mm.
say that people have to truly want the benefits that accrue from it. I mean, if you don't work out, then, as a matter of reality, you just clearly don't value the benefits of working out. You're disconnected from the why. You have no functional appreciation for what you would actually work out for. Right. And I think working out is a good case, because for a lot of people still, the only association they make with the purported benefits of working out are all about beauty standards and physical appearance and things like that. And that's
Yep.
a bedeviling problem and a vexing problem in society, which is a separate one to, that's bigger, greater minds than I to solve. But for a lot of
Yep.
people, they just don't see the functional connection, or I should say rather, the connection between an act like exercising regularly and redeveloping your why as a matter of function the way we do. Yeah, so some people just do not see that, right? Some people, I think, if for them it's just all bound up and, well, if I don't find my passion, I don't find what I really want to get up and do every day, it's like, yeah, man, that's the ideal, and that may come. But in terms of our theme today, what we're talking about, like where you start and stuff like that, I think the question of why, which I agree is so central, and it's such a deal breaker in terms of your ability to get started. I think that's a very good starting point for a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a loaded question again, but some people have never really asked themselves that. They just sort of, I just said, see it on the surface, go to the gym, there's vanity involved, you will look good. That's a byproduct of doing that work. But how consistently will you show up after 6 months of seeing average results when you're comparing yourself to other people? And that's kind of when I constantly tell people you got to go a little bit deeper enough. You'll still get that goal. You'll still, you'll eventually look the way you want to look if you set your target. But there will be days where you probably aren't seeing it and you're just about to give up because you've just started and then you're not seeing any results. You got to have a deeper meaning. And I always encourage people to remain committed and consistent throughout, and don't see this as a finish line, because there is no finish line until you hit the grave. It's got to be constant. Just keep going, just keep moving forward. And some people just don't want to fire. That's, like I said, the big question. But we're moving a few folks out there.
Yeah.
There's some folks out there getting after
Yeah, I
it.
get it. Yeah, we're doing our piece, man. And well, no, I should say it's more accurate to say our clients are doing the work, and we are but guides. And this is not, just a humble brag, humility here or anything like that. I really do believe that about the coaching process. I mean, I think it's clear that the clients of mine where the message does take and they do follow through on the plan are the ones for whom the contribution and the framing and the formulation of the actual plan itself, it's been all them and me just, perhaps just like good leading questions and, steering them in the right direction here and there. But otherwise it's all them, right? And that's the way it should be. The insights that you arrive at on your own, even if you need, it's like something like guided meditation. The reason guided meditation works so well isn't because you need the voice of the other person per se to do it for you. It's just an instrumental part of the process. It's just an instrumental part of the process of allowing you to develop insight that you otherwise perhaps wouldn't have developed in the absence of that external voice. So we are, doing our best to, help people hustle and move things in the right direction. But yeah, look, I don't know whether to be cynical and pessimistic or optimistic about this. I lean cynical. I always have. I'm one of those sort of rare coaches where, and it's funny because I went to grad school at, it was very much in the positive psychology tradition. I got a tremendous amount of respect for positive psychology, and I love a lot of positive psychologists, they're friends and colleagues and so forth. But I'm something of a pessimist, and I have something of a I will help some people at the margins while the world burns around us. I kind of have that kind of, I think, framing and outlook on the world. What about you? Like, are you at heart a pessimist about humanity's, do you think there's going to be enough, let's call them selection pressures in culture, people like us and all the other people in the world that are as professionals and as amateurs, everyone who's trying to advance the idea that people need to start these good behavior changes and these good lifestyle changes and stuff like that. Are you hopeful that there's going to be enough of that to turn the tide in civilization when it comes to things like depression? I mean, you mentioned before, we live in a time of, greater mental health support and awareness than ever before, and yet these are the most depressed and anxious times ever. So, I mean, do you see that trajectory abating or going in the other direction, or do you think we're heading to, our ultimate demise in some sense?
Yeah, that's a big question. Well, when it comes to the sort of pessimism and optimism, I'd probably lean more towards optimism. Whereas over the years, I was quite pessimistic and cynical, because when you sort of hang around those with that frame and mindset, it can also have that ripple effect onto you and your thoughts, and everyone just says, oh yeah, the world's screwed. Oh yeah, I think it is too. And then you can just fall into this big trap of just everyone sort of whinging about the same thing. So for me, obviously, I'm more leaning towards the other side, but at the same time, my attitude is, yeah, you can't save everyone. You just can't. And some people don't want to be saved. They just want to go down with the ship. Okay, well, then you made that choice. I'm sorry. I'm going to help those who are treading water and just want to get the fuck out and help, because, yeah, you can't be everything to everybody and help everybody. As far as where the world's going, oh, God, that's another loaded question
Loaded
for a
questions and
6-hour
fucking
podcast.
tangents today, man. I tell you.
I know. It's great. I love it. Yeah, there's days where, yeah, the optimism fades and you just go, what the fuck has happened to this planet? And then there's other days where it's like, okay, I try not to live in sort of la la land. I do live in reality, looking around going, there's some scary shit happening and possibly to happen in the future. But, we have an opportunity and options to hold our heads strong and build more resilience and courage and deal with that. And also be leaders when others around us are crumbling, just the same as what happened with COVID. People that you thought were super strong crumbled, and you're like, wow, okay. So I think in these times, there are going to be more people that are going to start stepping up. It won't be the greater majority, though, because they're all happy to be, not everyone can be leaders. That's just true. Not everyone wants that responsibility or are that kind of person as well, because that takes effort and energy to put into becoming that trait as a personality. So again, some are going to drown, some are going to want to be saved, and some will be the ones that are saving others. So yeah, I'm leaning more towards the optimist side, but yeah, there'll be lots of leaders, but they won't be a majority of them. But hey, the world seems to be run by a handful of people, so let's overthrow them so we can make things
Yeah,
better.
maybe that is the optimistic view of the future. I am. I guess I'm what you'd call a micro level optimist, but a macro level pessimist. No, actually, a macro level mega pessimist. So I have a real confidence and belief in certain human beings. Like I actually think that
Mhm.
and I'm actually really, some of the clients I love working with the most are the people who are clearly brilliant and clearly just bristling with potential, but at the same time, tragically either unsuited to the line of work they're in or unfulfilled by the life they're living or whatever. And yet just can't. I mean, those are the people I love working with the most, and yet they're the ones who seem the most tragic when they don't actually do the work, because they are kind of the
Mm.
ones who should know better. You know what I mean? Like
Yep.
I, fortunately, my micro level optimism. Why I'm a micro level optimist is because most of the time the smart people do prevail, right? The smart people do figure it out and they come up with a plan and they see the plan through. And they're the ones who, write back and say, oh, all's going well. Thanks again for the work, and, it helped set me in the right direction. And, glad to have, found myself in a better place and so forth, So at that level, I think there are many more competent and potential laden people in the world that are simply not achieving a level of fulfillment and flourishing that they could be. So on that level, I'm an
Mhm.
optimist. There's opportunities for more people out there to become better versions
Yeah.
of themselves. But at the macro level, I think civilizationally, there's just such an overwhelming amount of man-made problems, like the comforts of civilization that we spoke about earlier, and that kind of evolutionary mismatch, where I just feel that something's got to give, and I think some amount of that, whatever's going to give, is going to be propagated by a critical mass of people in society not doing the things that they should be doing. I think a clear case on this one is obesity, right? So obesity,
Yep.
especially for single payer healthcare systems, there is no sign of this disease becoming, or this disorder, perhaps I should say, there is no sign of this abating. There is no sign of this trajectory going anything but exponentially up. We are clearly not grappling with this problem in the way that we should be. And so why should I have room for optimism on the front of obesity? I can be optimistic at a macro level. I mean, at the micro level,
Yeah.
I might
Gotcha.
be optimistic that I
Yeah.
can land with certain obese clients of mine and be like, here's a step by step, and an intelligent person will see it through and be like, eventually we'll make a way for it to land. But I just feel like that either the messaging or the amount of messaging or whatever it is, it's not going to get through to a sufficient number of people to reverse this problem at the rate or the rapidity that's needed to reverse it.
Yeah, well, that's a massive one too. Like you mentioned about obesity, that's epidemic now, unfortunately, and I guess it brings back to the point where some people, why don't they get started? And again, comforts. It's too easy. It's way too easy. And when they see the hard road ahead of the damage they've done from that, I guess, poor self-care, it's just too daunting to even consider. And that's why, like I said, I've got a lot of friends that are in that sort of boat. And, I might have a couple of words here and there about it, but they're cemented now. You just think they're just going to go out that way. And then once I sort of get that vibe from them, I don't say it anymore because, again, I'm just on my soapbox trying to help them, positive thinking. And people don't even respond to that anymore. When they're too far down, they're like, that's not even going to do anything. Motivation's not going to do shit. And like I said, that's why I tap into the why for some of these people, and hopefully something sticks enough for them to think, shit, I want to be able to be there for my kids or my partner or whatever. Because otherwise, I'm out of here very soon. And sometimes it works for some people and sometimes it just doesn't. Like I said, can't save everybody. And some people probably don't want to be saved, which is a shame because, life is a gift. And some people just treat it like a wrecking ball and, and they're out. So, but yeah, that's a massive thing, the obesity realm that's going on. It's quite horrifying, especially when I go out and about and look around. No judgment, but you just see it and you just think, dang, wow. Interesting times.
Well, it's like no judgment, but judgment. I mean, and
Judgment.
not sort of like judging the people so much as judging.
Yeah.
And then to talk about the macro level acceptance, if not, outright propagation of this fucking other,
Yeah, society's just accepted it. We've all just like I see billboards with large people and it's like, be your true self. It's like, yeah, but you weren't born that way. Like, and then there's a whole argument. It's like, sometimes I see that stuff and just think, okay. Like, you see the people, the fit models, and that's one extreme to the other. And that's unattainable for the average person because those people do this 7 days a week, 5 hours a day. And when we're throwing that in our faces every day and people buy the gym equipment and then 2 months later it's out on the front lawn getting picked up for hard rubbish, they say they tried, but because they were comparing what they were seeing and being sold in that way. And that's just smart marketing. And then, like I said, now when you see people say, I'm happy the way I am, I said, okay, great. But sometimes I often wonder, are they really? If you're sort of, in that state and you're sluggish and tired and you're carrying around a lot of weight, I don't know how that is happiness. Emotionally, you might feel great. You caught up with your friends, you feel good, but physically, fuck, it must be taxing, And okay, I understand too, there's different sesame types, our bodies and, ectomorph, mesomorph, endomorph, all those sort of types, because some people always sort of talk about, that's just the way I am, or I'm born this way or whatever. It's like, well, you can manipulate that to a degree. Physically, I know a lot of people that were massively overweight office workers who have just lost 40, 50 kilos. You're like, holy shit, it's doable. We see TV shows about it. It's possible. It's just wanting to, get a deep enough why to make a start if you're happy to change that. If not, some people are going to go out the way they're going to go out. And some people have accepted themselves as that being. But like I said, with judgment, I try not to judge the person, but judging society, it's like, there's a lot to answer for. Corporations, marketing, fucking garbage food. And you just think, wow, it's just so stimulating for so many people when we go out there and we see all the bright packets and the colors and the joy, and we're all just sold endless amounts of dopamine just so we can feel good, because that's what we like, pain and pleasure. It's basically that.
Yeah, that's it. And look, I mean, I always come back to this idea that people, because everyone's different, people take the idea that everyone's different to mean that anything goes. When really it's everyone's different, but there are better and worse ways of doing things for you, right? So people just totally think that because I have this unique composition, like because 200 kilos might be ridiculously obese for some people, but not for others, that's all the latitude I need to basically approach my life and my lifestyle in this haphazard, indiscriminate way. When really, basically, if you, and this comes back to the idea of both the why being about the function and also the idea of us having too many options now. Because when we have too many options, the idea of anything goes really becomes just, just like an intractable problem for a lot of people, right? They accept this idea that everyone's different, that we propagate in society, and that we rightly propagate in society because everyone is different. But they take it to mean that anything goes. And unfortunately, we live in a world where what you can transform anything goes into is this limitless array of self-sabotaging, indulgent, hedonistic, debauched often pleasures, where not only are we avoiding pain and seeking pleasure, we're absorbing so much pleasure that the mere concept of pain at any level just becomes completely alien to us. It's actually become that bad, on that level.
Yeah.
And look, I mean, just apart from the fact we're clearly not doing anyone any favors when it comes to something like obesity, I don't think a lot of coaches will disagree with me on this, but I don't think you have to take your client at face value. Now, you can conceal how much you think they're bullshitting about something in a dialogue with them and then maybe push back on them later. But there's become this kind of sort of widespread belief in coaching that if someone who is, for example, visibly obese, which means they are visibly unwell, by the way, there's no well version of obesity.
No, not
That
at all.
that basically, you have, if they say something like, I'm perfectly happy with my body and I'm just going to work around the idea that, like, we know the connection between obesity and psychological dysfunction now. It makes your decision making worse. It clouds your emotional clarity. It's associated with increased depression, anxiety. The list goes on. I think as a coach, if you can't sort of stare the reality of your client in the face and kind of, and you do it with compassion and do it with patience, or maybe you don't do it at all and you bide your time for another time or whatever. But I think this idea that if a client says something like that to you, like they're sitting there, fucking 250 kilos and clearly, what am I coaching this dude for his development for? Clearly, this is where we need to start, or this is a big part of where we need to start. If they say to you, I'm fine with this and we're just going to work around this, the idea that as a coach, you're supposed to accept that and be like, okay, yep, we'll just, you're the boss, we'll take that at face value. I mean, yeah, you are the boss. And again, we are but guides and we're here to help yourself make the changes. But fuck, man,
I would send them elsewhere.
If we didn't live in such a cotton wool society, it would be so much better because coaches would just be able to sit there and say, all right, so the first step is we need 150 kilo loss and then we'll attend to the rest of it, And God, what a different world that would be for our profession, like if we just doubt.
You're right. I mean, it's almost like, we're afraid to speak the hard truths. And when we do, we're, we lack empathy and sympathy. We're hard asses and, oh, you can't say that. That's not right. It's like hard truths really go a long way for a lot of people, and they can be damaging for some if they're not emotionally equipped in some respects. But I think it can also have a really good impact. You can't sort of just, I mean, it just depends on, I guess, how it's said, but I still do believe in hard truths really do matter. And again, most clients, as I say, they come to us because they have reached that point. But if I had a client in that situation, I would just be like, look, I'm not the right coach for you. If you're happy as is and there's another area you want to work on, and we can work on that. That's also going to be part of that could also assist you into being where you really want to be. So yeah, it's a debatable one, but yeah, we're in this world of people just knee-jerking, getting defensive and offended on just about everything that's said. It's like you scroll through social media and like you can't even have an opinion without getting ripped apart. It's like,
well, let me give you a hot take on something, bro. Like, so for the when you say, maybe I'm not the right coach for you, like I would say the same thing, kind of thing. Like I would just be like, my philosophy around coaching is just not aligned with your goals or whatever. But when they do go to those other kinds of coaches who maybe do indulge at face value this idea that, oh, I'm perfectly set, we're just going to work around this, is that merely just a different coaching philosophy? Or from your perspective, again, just hot take, is it malpractice in some sense?
Well, it all depends on what the client wants to get, because they're the one in charge of the session. Yeah, that's a hot topic as well. I mean, for me personally, I wouldn't take someone's money if they were coming to me for something else other than, I mean, okay, my sort of niche is based around health and wellness. So I think mind and body go hand in hand. You can't just sort of work the mind while the body just lies dormant. Both have to work together and be best friends. So that'd be my approach. So if someone did come to me and they say, look, I'm feeling a bit flat and I just want to improve and make a bit more money in my career. It's like, okay, well, obviously we could work on that, but how energetic do you want to have? Which means that their body has no energy because it's not being fueled properly. Yet the mind just wants to get the promotion and make all the money. I would handle it by saying, well, look, this other side needs to be worked on too in order for you to get exactly what you want. Because some people do neglect the body. The mind's just taking over and they just drag this meat suit around and kick it to shreds. So for me personally, yeah, I would just sort of say, this is not, this is something that I think works together. As far as malpractice with other coaches, well, I think it's down to how honest every coach chooses to be. If they're just taking that person's money and feeding them a crock of shit, well, then, yeah, that is malpractice, and we hear about the stories, the big pump up and everything's great and, you go for it and blah, blah, blah. And then they walk out feeling happy and then they don't do anything. Our goals is to shift them from A to B. We're the bridge, You want to make sure that they're fucking getting over that bridge from A to B. And that way they do know that they got to the other side rather than sort of give them a bit of a prep up, which I'm sure others probably do that out there. I see a lot of coaching pages and posts and stuff. And you're like, oh, okay, it's putting a Band-Aid on things when really, people like us are very direct and we want to sort of get in there and see where it's bleeding and say, right, do you want to stop this? I think everyone's got their own approach, but yeah, that's a big question about the sort of malpractice thing. I think in your own heart if you're being honest or dishonest. I think that's up to the person to, they can sleep at night, but not for where I stand. Like I said, I've knocked back a few people that have come to me with different things and I'm like, well, okay, I'm probably not the right person for you. I'm just being honest about that because you don't want to just, give someone a big boost and take their cash and then see them get nowhere. No, the goal is to help them get to where they want to get to. And, we're there as a supporting team, to work at it. Yeah, there's a lot of dodgy shit out there. We hear and see at that, but not us.
No, well, I mean, I like to
bro
think
hangers.
not, man. I mean, I do see it as malpractice. I see it. Perhaps it's not a malpractice of commission, but omission. Like I think that a lot of coaches won't necessarily, like if say a client, just to use the same example, if a client more or less said, like the weight is something we're just going to not consider and it's just going to be about my career or something like that. And then that same client, session after session, comes to you and says things like, like I'm constantly depressed at work. I don't have good emotional clarity. I don't have good decision-making clarity. I'm not as creative and thoughtful as I used to be and stuff like that. Given what we now know about the, and it's usually thought of in terms of its relationship to things like chronic inflammation, but there's other mechanisms as well. Given what we now know about the connection between obesity and things like depression and type 2 diabetes, there's something, people often refer to depression as the diabetes of the mind. And, so given what we now know about being that badly physiologically out of shape and all kinds of impairments on your mental health and performance, I think the coach who sits there, and takes someone's money while, skirting around what is now a very, very obvious and, scientifically informed and supported truth, I think that is malpractice, within our profession.
Yeah, 100%.
I think that this is actually almost where the idea, the very correct idea, which we've spoken about in this podcast, that it's up to the client and it's their responsibility and stuff like that. Maybe that gives some coaches a little bit of an escape hatch in that respect. as if to say, well, it was kind of about the, like it's not like a doctor,
Mm,
it's not like a doctor-patient relationship where if a doctor fails to give
yeah.
you information about something like the state of your bodily health or whatever, and then you end up dying of a heart attack, well, that's obviously malpractice. We don't have that, we don't have that professional expectation within our line of work. And within our line of work, the party line, and it is the right party line, is that it's all about the client themselves makes the decisions, and you help orient them in the direction of that decision making, and help them set strategies and plans accordingly. So yeah, I mean, I think maybe that relationship, right as it is, maybe gives people a little bit of cover to say things like, oh well, it's up to them. I don't have to say anything about their fucking like obesity and
Mm,
shit like that. I'll just kind of like do my best to kind of like work around that, knowing that pretty obviously in some cases it is something like you're being totally dysfunctionally out of shape that's actually causing you these mental performance issues. I can just sort of conveniently abscond myself from that discussion, and I'll leave it over to
yeah.
you. And and you come back the next week and you're still not making decisions with good clarity. Okay, yeah, and just think in the back of your mind, well, what the fuck did you eat last week?
Well, it's pretty obvious, but yeah, like I said, ignoring the elephant in the room, pardon
Yeah,
the
yeah,
pun.
right.
It's yeah, that sort of stuff. Yeah, I think I like to give more coaches credit that they should know that there's more to it, and there are scientific linkages, as you mentioned as well. I mean, the science is out there now. We all know about it. We all hear the stuff on TV. Exercise daily and eat a balanced diet. I mean, we've been sold that for fucking decades. But like I said, marketing's so powerful today. All the bright colors and the big foods and the enjoyment. Our brains are like, we just we're just wired, overly wired for pleasure now more than ever before. And it's just, yeah, like I said, the whole obesity thing, it's madness, and it's just sad to see. It really is sad to see. It's like, dang,
Yeah, well, and another one is, and one that I think is quite salient for me, and this is an area where I will fully cop to being an imperfect practitioner of my own good advice, because even us coaches, we have our blind spots and our deficiencies and our defects and so forth. So for me, I'm a very introverted person. I'm not much of an empath, which is like quite unusual among coaches. I'm a homebody, and like I'm much more of a place person and a things person than a people person. I'm quite, it's sort of considered something an un-PC and unkind term these days, but I'm quite aspy. I'm very much like my wife mocks me as the absent-minded professor a lot of the time. I'm a very introverted person in many ways, and so my blind spot is in the social world, and so I have to make a point. Like something like exercise for me comes effortlessly. Like I've rebuilt my
yeah.
brain to the point where it's not even a chore anymore. It's something I get to do. I love doing it. I get a lot of benefit from it and stuff like that. And there's no disconnect between the intellectual knowledge that I need to do this and the experiential reality that I actually do fucking get it done. But in the social world, that hasn't bedded in for me in quite the same way. Like I do the work. This is the thing. I do the work. I get out there. I try and socialize and stuff like that, but it's not the thing that I'm like looking forward to. It's not the thing that I've like.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't rebuilt that part of my brain yet, and maybe I never will. Maybe my brain on some level is kind of hardwired, in such a way that that is never going to be for me, like exercise and healthy eating and other good developmental habits and lifestyle behaviors are. But I still try and get out and do the work and get out in the social sphere and stuff like that. And it's like, again, little wins here and there. It's like, okay, I went out hanging out with 30 people I didn't know, tried mingling. Yeah, it was good. Had some good conversations with people. Bored as fuck most of the time. Wishing I was by myself. Like a lot of the time, or back with my wife. But I got out there and I fucking did it. I got out there and I did it. And it also just makes me realize that that's me being a bitch in modern civilization as well, right? Because for most of human history, someone who prefers solitude like me was a dead human, right? A human
Mm.
alone in nature is a dead human. I have the affordance of living in a society now where if I want to, like homebody myself away for the weekend with my wife and just watch TV, I will take that creature comfort when I know intellectually that's my developmental blind spot. And I do got to get out in the world, and I do got to mingle with people, and I do got to socialize. And that's my version of being obese. Right. So like I have a kind of like social obesity in a way. And that's my work on anyway.
And how you think you're going with it now? You think it's something you want to completely eradicate, where you can just be the Gareth man out there mingling, just like, yeah, cool, whatever?
Yeah, I love Henry Rollins' take on this. Henry Rollins once said there's a difference between being in front of people and being with people. So I'm good at being in front of people. You know, I like being in front of my clients. I love being in front of my students. You know, when I've got a task to do, and I've got a distinct podcasting is another one. When I've got a reason to be in social engagement with other people, and I'm kind of part of the, a central focus of that, I'm fine. You know, it's like being in bands and stuff like that. I always love being in bands.
Yeah.
But being with people is a different issue. And especially, like, I mean, example, I was talking about the other night, I went out the other night, it was like 30 people I didn't know, who were all mutual friends of one single friend of mine. Didn't realize there was as many people that were there as, I didn't realize as many people were going to be there as there was. I sort of showed up. It wasn't an occasion for me to be in front of people. It was an occasion for me to be with people. It doesn't come to me naturally, and it's not a terribly, it's not a kind of painful, go back to pain and suffering before, it's not an act of pain and suffering for me the way that it once was. Like now it's kind of, the pain and suffering is sort of tolerable in this way where it's kind of like, I'm kind of bored as fuck with these people, but, it's 2 hours out of my life, and I feel like it will have some developmental benefit for me. So it's not the worst thing in the world to grin and bear. And then, and then eventually over time, you do shit like that enough. If you're a socially aversive or, socially apprehensive person, and that's just another sort of, tool in your tool belt. Like fitness and like mindfulness and like healthy eating and stuff like that. All different things you can work on.
Yeah, and the more you do it, the more it just improves. And, you may never get it to the mountain because it's like, but it's something that you can maintain at least, where you're not feeling completely out of your depth or out of your comfort zone, where it's tolerable, I guess is the word I'm sort of looking for, where it's like, well, I can't really be bothered socializing tonight, but you know what? I'll go there for a couple of hours, and that was actually pretty cool. And then you're back to where you were, rather than just that whole sort of, oh, fuck, this is going to be daunting. But I understand what you say when you get into stages where you're more comfortable in what you know, like, working with your clients and teaching your students and doing podcasts. I mean, that's been developed. So even though it's still interaction, you're really comfortable with that. Other same with public speaking. Radio is completely different for me. Get me on a mic, talk about metal for 6 hours, I'm ready to go. But to sort of get out there and just public and be like, oh man, it's a completely different vibe. Even though what I'm still doing is public speaking, it's a whole different sort of sphere, I guess. So we have different modes of things that we can do, and some things that we try to do that's similar, but we struggle with, if that makes sense. Like, you're still interacting with your clients and your students, and podcasts, you're talking to heaps of people and you're just like, don't even think about it. But then going to a function, a party, it's still exactly the same principle, except that there's something there that's like, this is awkward, this is difficult, when it's really the same thing, but the brain has separated that experience from the other experiences that you have, which are virtually identical. You're just talking to people, but there's something there that makes you just go, yeah, this is awkward, this is weird, I shouldn't be here. It's strange, isn't it, when you think about it, when you think, hang on. I always talk to people about skilled transference, well, you've done it over there, shift it across to there. It's pretty much the same thing. You just got to learn to sort of, again, bridge it, bring it across, and then you'll just go, shit, it's no different to what I already do, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, well, I think that's another case of just the why, getting to the why you're doing it. As a matter, again, of experience, being a social butterfly hasn't yet, and probably likely will not, because I'm that old. No one's ever old enough to change significant aspects of their personality. But there are things about us that are innate, for want of a better word. Not necessarily unmodifiable, but a lot of what makes us, is laid down fairly early in life and is, is less modifiable than other things that, other traits that we might develop over the course of our lives. So the likelihood that I'm ever going to be someone who rarely enjoys the act of being a social butterfly for itself, the chances of that are virtually zero. But I think I've got a better understanding now of my why in that sphere of the world and that sphere of life. My why is that I am someone who values and promotes as part of my work, but as a personal philosophy as well, the idea of developing your person, holistically and, having a whole body and mind approach. I'm also someone who values the scientific method and, valuing empirical evidence and everything like that. And so the scientific case and just the total case for why I should be out in the social world is absolutely clear to me. Now, does that mean, does that understanding mean that I'm always going to apply myself and do it? No, I actually fall short. And actually, I'm interested to know, if you're happy to sort of say on air, do you have some version of that yourself? So for me, I think that is my kind of major ongoing work on, the thing where pretty good at doing what I need to be doing, but I do fall short. I do blow things off sometimes. Do you have a version of that yourself developmentally that you feel is not kind of, we're all a work in progress, but any one narrow thing that you would sort of concede to not being the optimal version of yourself, or at least yet?
Yeah, like I said, we're all works in progress. For me, I guess, yeah, well, some of that's public speaking. That's an area I really want to work on just for myself as a challenge. I'd like to present and do certain things, even though, okay, I've got a 30-year radio career under my belt. It's still a different ballgame to get that out there in front of people. Or if I, show up to a gig and some people say, I want you to introduce the band. I'm like, oh, really? But everyone's like, well, you're the radio guy. You're like, yeah, but that takes a lot more than just to do that. So, yeah, that sort of side of things is one little area that I want to improve on. I'm not a total, not say the word recluse. Yeah, I do socialize. It's just when it calls for it because I'm, so busy doing so many things. People often wonder, you go, how do you deal with, the solitude? I'm like, man, every day the schedule's full.
Yeah.
From the minute I get up till I get to bed, I've just got so much stuff to do and I'm ticking all the boxes. They're all beneficial things. So there isn't that kind of emptiness within myself because I'm feeling fulfilled in what I can, do and learn for myself and also, in the cause of helping others. But yeah, public speaking stuff, that's an area. Socializing, yeah, I'd say I'm a little bit similar in that respect. Going to, if I went to a completely different bar with different types of people, because again, we get used to a certain type of person we've grown with, especially, in the music business. I go to a gig, that's me at home because I know the personalities. And even if I don't know the people, there's a common interest. So we all accept each other, the way we look and our interests and stuff like that. But when you go to a completely different place and it's completely different clientele, I work the room in the sense of, okay, I'm going to talk to people and ask them questions. And yeah, sometimes that's a bit daunting when you just ask people questions and sometimes they're just so empty and you're just like, wow. And I'm thinking, okay, not everyone's there for a deep connection and a DM about the meaning of life because sometimes I like to go deep in conversations, no matter where it is. So those moments can be a little bit sort of like, do I belong? Do I belong? Do I fit here? And, do people get me? Am I going to be judged? I think a lot of people deal with that period. I think we all carry that kind of, that fear of judgment and acceptance, but I wouldn't say any of it's, crippling or, just a word. I can't even think of the word. Something that, I avoid. I mean, there's plenty of nights I've gone out on my own, hit bars and just hung out and just met people. And sometimes I've actually done it as an experiment. A few years ago, I was doing that. I thought, all right, I'm just going to go out and see if I can meet a whole bunch of people I don't know and just see how I feel about it. This is all sort of experiments through my coaching studies. And yeah, and then I'd go home going, wow, I interacted with 25 complete random strangers I'll probably never see again. What did I learn? What did I learn about people? Because again, it's a fascination that we develop on how people are, what they think, what they do. And it was almost like a sort of a little experiment on myself to be comfortable dealing with complete randoms. Because again, our clients are people that we don't know. that will sort of just come out of nowhere, and they've somehow seen our content somewhere and they want to work with us, and they might not have any interest in our personal interests and things like that. So you gotta build that strength to know that you're just dealing with all kinds of different people, regardless of what they like. So I found that experiment really, really cool. I always encourage other coaches, just go out one night by yourself. They're like, what? I go, yeah, just talk to people out of nowhere. Yeah, people are going to walk off from you. Some will just go, yeah, cool, man. Everyone's on their guard as well. I noticed a lot of people are distrusting, women especially. You can ask them a question. It's just like, well, but it was a good experiment. It's something I encourage people, just go out randomly by yourself and just talk to people and just sort of see. And there's moments where you just feel so fucking awkward. Remember the first time I did, I stand there going, why am I here? Why am I doing this? This is just ridiculous. And I was like, no, this is a test. You got to learn to get through this and deal with this. And after, good couple of hours and a few sort of drinks looking around, I was like, everyone's there for the same thing, just to interact. Whatever their motives are is theirs. But I found it really cool. So it actually did strengthen my way of socializing, especially through the COVID times when we stopped doing that. Now there's habits formed that people don't even want to socialize anymore because they just happy to be at home all the time and don't go out as much. I've noticed that being in the city the last couple of months, at like on a Saturday night at 8 p.m, you look around going, what happened to this city? It's dead. And even at 10 or 11 at night when I'm leaving a show, I'm like, wow, people are just at home. Yeah. No one's out. Like, it's not buzzing with energy and people socializing. So I think it's a really important factor to keep up as a skill, because again, we got pushed into our little huts and we got told not to come out for a while. And over time, habits form. And yeah, I'm actually going to stay at home. Comfortability sets in. Let's order takeaway. And then 2 years later, you see friends and they're in pretty average condition. You're like, what the fuck happened? So I think it's something that could be ongoing as a practice of socializing in some respects.
For sure. I mean, it's always going to have its crucial importance. But I mean, just go back to this idea of like options. So, and comfort and everything like that. I mean, so for me, I love the experiment of just putting yourself out there and like, I think I'm actually good at that, because that's socializing in a very artificial way. That really is different. The difference between being in front of someone and being with someone, right? So the experiment that you just described, I'd have no problem doing, because I'm going to go there with this idea of this is how I'm going to, in some sense, perform, just like I perform as a coach and perform as a teacher and all these kinds of things. But like the night that I was just describing was a night where you turn up and it's like, oh, this is Max, this is Carissa, this is Steven, kind of thing. What do you do? And those ones, those organic socializing conversations, the ones where you're with people, that's what I still struggle with, because I could find what you're describing. Like, I could find that endlessly interesting, even if every single person's response was to completely repudiate me and be like, fuck this cunt and shit. Like, the fuck's up with this guy? Like, it actually wouldn't bother me at all. But like in these situations where it's kind of organic and it's like, oh, this is a friend of a person that I'm friends with, and 20 seconds into them describing their life, I fucking am already bored as shit with them and wishing that I was at home watching a Netflix documentary, because the alternatives in this world of comfort we live in now are just so much better than conversation with the average human being, like average organic conversation. Maybe it isn't, and maybe that is my kind of pessimistic topspin on it. Maybe because I'm not organically out there in the social world as much as I ought to, or maybe it's sort of what you might consider subnormal levels. Maybe I'm not realizing and recognizing the fact that actually there is some real good alternatives in the real world of humanity compared to what's on Netflix. But boy, that pull, I think this is where I really do identify with the people who don't start. Some way, it's kind of like, well, like the pull that's there. It's kind of like, oh, fuck, I'm supposed to go to like this barbecue with a bunch of jabronis I don't know in like 20 minutes. Like, oh, the fucking new documentary about like some, like some crazy thing that the Pepsi Where's My Jet or something like that is on Netflix. Fuck, like, how could I not sit and watch that? God damn it. You
look for a better, always look for a better option.
That's it, man. It's like fucking, it's my version of I got to go lift versus fucking I'm going to sit on the couch here. Work in progress, bro.
options.
Yeah, no, too many fucking options, bro. Yeah, well, difficult questions, loaded questions, and tangents galore, bro. But I reckon this might be this one I reckon we could waxing lyrical and trying to set the world at rights, perhaps hopelessly. That's the macro.
We'll keep doing our
It's
best.
the macro pessimist in me coming out here. Maybe this whole last
Yeah.
hour and 15 minutes has really been for naught. But even if it does amount to a tiny fractional amount of difference in the world, bro, I think we're at least motivated by the right cause here. I think we both see the writing on the wall in terms of, that there really is a disconnect between intention and action out there in the world. And,
Yeah.
it may seem like an easy, straightforward, and just like, overly oversimplified way of putting it, but motherfuckers just got to get started. There's just,
Yeah.
we've created this society and this incentive structure where there are too many options. There's too much comfort. Motivation clearly isn't enough. There just isn't enough
Yep.
incentive to be disciplined and build routines and build structures. And again, go back to the idea of good. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. I see too much of this in the world, and it's a simply stated problem that seems more intractable and more insoluble than it needs to be. So I hope we're doing something to track that in the right direction anyway.
I hope so too, and I guess it will just, flow on to those that we work with and those who want to get to that place. Like I said, we can't save everyone, and some are going to go down with the ship, unfortunately. But choices, options. There's always a choice and there's always an option. It's just tapping into them a little bit deeper to have them choose the right one. We'll keep fighting and keep punching.
Yeah, that's it, man. That's all we can do. Well, it's been a pleasure, bro, as always. Let's do this again in another few podcasts time. Who knows? Maybe we will have those solutions by that point.
Yeah, and then we'll save the world.
Save the world, and next thing you know, we'll be accepting that Nobel in Stockholm for having saved the world. That's the goal, bro. That's the goal.
And then TED Talks.
Yeah, man. Well, dude.
The Gareth and Google.
The consulting appearances. God, boy, we're going to be fucking swimming in liquid cash, man. That's going to be life.
Bring the shit.
Good on you, mate. Good to see you, bro.
Likewise, buddy.
Take care, Hoagie. And it got me thinking.